Welcome to Vantage Point Podcast, a podcast brought to you by NWR Communications and 92 Studio. This podcast is intended for education and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. G'day and welcome to the latest episode where we're joined by Tetratherix, who lists on the ASX this morning under the ticker TTX after raising $25 million through Barrenjoey and Morgans Financial. We're joined by their co-founder and CTO Ali and the CEO Will Knox. Two genuinely good guys who you want to back, I believe. We really hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks. All right, guys. Thanks very much for joining us. So obviously got Ali, the founder of Tetratherix, and CEO Will.
Thanks for having us, mate.
It's a big day. We're recording this on the Thursday before the listing. It's going to go live on this morning, being listing day, which is a big day.
Yeah.
Talk us through, Ali, first of all, your accent, with all due respect, isn't Australian.
Of course.
You came here 20 years ago. Give us your immigration story in terms of coming to Australia first.
Thank you very much for having us. I'm Ali Fatih. I'm the founder of Tetratherix. I'm originally Iranian. I did mechanical engineering and I was working for a company in London before coming to Australia back in 2007. So yeah, it's been almost 20 years. I originally came here with a student visa. I did my master's in chemical and biomolecular engineering. That was intentional because I wanted to get close as possible to medicine. And what I did as a part of my thesis during my 2 years program in my master's degree was essentially close to tissue engineering. Again, intentional to move towards as much as possible towards medicines. I will get into the how I came up with the technology that is essentially core and background of Tetratherix. But all these bits and pieces of a journey to come to Australia, doing my master in chemical and biomolecular engineering and then move towards PhD was essentially how the pieces of the puzzles get together for me to think about the core technology that I invented during my PhD and eventually the story of Tetratherix.
Well above my pay grade, that's for sure. Now, Will, talk us to, before we get into Tetratherix, just your prior history before Tetratherix. Where were you, what were you doing and whatnot?
So basically been in this industry for 20, 25 years now. Originally wanted to get into neurosurgery of all things. So I left school and got into the medical landscape around trying to get into that surgical world, and then realized very quickly that wasn't for me. And so jumped out, university dropout, let's call it.
One of those.
And then got into more of the combination of both commercial and clinical within the industry. And so did a business degree and then tried to, 25 years ago, there wasn't a lot of people in the industry that were trying to straddle both. And so I saw that as a bit of an opportunity to create some differentiation in the market. So initially cut my teeth at Cochlear, worked with them for a couple of years around business analysis, and really excitingly got involved in some new product development, but then also the marketing and the business side as well. Then, went through both international businesses as well as local here in Australia, companies like Medtronic, where I really learnt what was involved in the distribution side and the sort of more sales and marketing behind medical devices and medical technologies. But throughout that period, I had some stints in the US where I got my head around, or got a taste, if you like, for what was involved in the actual development and sort of early stage upstream part of the medical device industry. And so was really interested in getting more involved in that type of thing. And so came back to Australia and tried to sort of be involved in that area of medical devices from a local smaller business perspective. So worked in distribution for a business called Life Healthcare, which went through a similar sort of listing and private equity style M&A pathway, which was interesting to be a part of. But then jumped out and started my own business around the commercialization and development of what I'd learnt from the US in that sort of more sort of product design development and upstream part of the market, where myself and my business partner, Jeff Reed, created a business that was essentially focused on regenerative medicine, particularly for orthopedic and spinal applications. Got that up and running, and then actually sold that through a deal to Device Technologies, which is the region's largest provider of medical technologies and a distribution partner for multiple businesses like Da Vinci or Intuitive, the robotic surgery out of the US, and a bunch of others. So went through that process. And then back in 2018, I was looking for the next thing to sink my teeth into. Had a few options both here in Australia and one that we were very closely assessing in the US that would mean moving the family across and getting into more of that US-based upstream part of the market that I was really interested in. But thankfully, at a New South Wales Medical Device Fund event, came across Ali and Terence and what they'd created and the technology, and immediately saw the opportunity to create a very differentiated sort of platform opportunity that hadn't really been seen in the market yet. And we'll get into that around that medical Lego that we talk about. But yeah, put all of the other stuff on hold and jumped into getting involved with these guys. And that was in 2018, initially as a commercial advisor at the board level, and then very quickly understood the potential and what these guys had created and thought this is actually something that can have real differentiation in the market. So 2021 came on board full-time as CEO, and as they say, the rest is history.
And here we are, listing day. And without stealing too much of the thunder in terms of Tetratherix story, Will, just in terms of how it was actually founded, obviously I think it spun out of University of Uni, PhD that you're working on. Sure. Just a brief sort of how did it all come about? What was the 100%. Problem?
So basically, City University, I did my master's, and thesis over my master thesis was the topic over my master thesis was to essentially make a piece of a cartilage and implant it back in the body. The first day that I went to the operation theater, essentially it became clear to me that it's a science fiction. It's not commercially feasible. Clinicians not going to adopt it, regulatory issues, and so on and so forth. So that was essentially the trigger point for me to make something, right, and essentially make a piece of tissue outside and implant it. Use the body as the best bioreactor, let the body to repair and regenerate itself. So for doing that, what I needed materials that can be injected, so causing least amount of a damage to the surrounding tissue during the administrations. You needed to form somewhat of a structure to support cellular integrations and regenerations. It needs to stick, be adhesive to the place that it's being injected to. So you don't want to inject something in the knee, end up in your brain. And lastly, it needed to resorb over time to let the body does what it needs to do over time. So the 4 characteristics, and essentially I use what we're saying, this sort of like a medical Lego to be able to tune to get these 4 parts, 4 requirements bonded together, make a new molecule, new polymer to have all these 4 characteristics, injectables, temperature responsive, so what forms that chewing gum consistency, that's a structure, being sticky, adhesive, and essentially resorbable over time. So what I did, I defined that problem. I was very lucky that I could work in a research group that has very good access to funds and also allow me to work multidisciplinary with School of Medicines and Engineering to essentially work on this thesis, this topic of mine to essentially establish this new molecule. That was my PhD essentially. I moved towards a PhD 2010 and we invented the molecule around 2010, 2011. Sydney University supported with the patents, supported the whole patent journey for almost like a 5-6 years, which was amazing. And I finished my PhD 2014. We had the molecule, we had that polymer. We have done some biocompatibility study in small animals, but I knew that it has potentials and I didn't want to stay at university. I knew that I can do something with this commercially. So start negotiating with university. We got initially the license of the use of a technology from the City University. I left uni 2015 and with Terence, Tez, we co-founded essentially Triumph. It used to be called Triumph, now Tetratherix in 2015.
Yeah, nice. And in terms of the patents and whatnot, everything's signed over. Obviously to Tetratherix.
So what happened was Sydney University defined, because they want to make sure that like once they assign the ownership of the patents to small companies, that those companies essentially deliver. What they did, they defined 5 milestones that we needed to meet those 5 milestones within 6 years. We addressed those in like 2 years. And after that, they essentially said that, do you want the ownership of these patents? And we say, yeah, of course. And then they essentially assigned the ownership of all those patents to Tetratherix in exchange for some royalties in sale of the products.
And in terms of this medical Lego, it's a good lingo. How important? First of all, can you explain it? And just in terms of the modularity, how important is that? in terms of application?
It is very important. Like if I may, like from an application point of view, we have our bone franchise, which essentially involves dental and orthopedic, and we have this sort of like a tissue spacing franchise. Like when we talk about franchise, essentially like the segmented applications of this medical Lego in the different fields of medicine to address different clinical needs. For example, for dental applications, our product needs to be resorbed back to the body within 4 weeks. For prosthetic spacing, tissue spacings, it needs to be stable at least for 12 weeks. So with this modularity of the Lego, by adding more of one piece of the Lego, we can essentially tune these properties to make sure that it is resorbable within 4 days for dental applications, but stable for at least 12 weeks for prosthetic spacing. Here with the product doesn't need to be visible under ultrasound or CT imaging, but here for prosthetic spacings, we have to make sure that it is visible under ultrasound and CT scan. So how we do this is by adding those different parts of the Lego to make it a faster, slower resorbing to the body, or make it visible under different imaging techniques, and so on and so forth. And that is the beauty of this medical Lego. We can identify the clinical needs, and with how we essentially tune and alter this chemistry of that medical Lego, we can address different clinical needs.
Yeah, it'd be good to dive into the different applications you talked about, orthopedics and dental. This is all from the one platform. That's sort of the unique offering in terms of Tetratherix.
Yeah.
How important is that? To particularly from obviously you need to commercialize it and get through all the regulatory stuff as well. But just from a margin perspective, being able to generate a number of different applications and products for different parts of the body or whatnot. How do you sort of look at that?
Yeah, it's a really important differentiator for the business. And I think for me, having been in the industry for a couple of decades now, that's where I think the most unique element from a commercial and a technical perspective comes into play. And so when we're talking about a platform opportunity, what it means is that the underlying data set, safety, efficacy, and the validation work that's been done, as Ali mentioned, the little bits of changes here and there that we want to add in or delete or use a different piece of Lego, the 90+% of the validation work has already been done.
Yep.
So that means that we can get paths to market faster. So the regulatory work can be streamlined because of that. We're interchangeable across data sets, which is a really important piece of the puzzle. Excuse the pun. But then what that provides us is a way that we can also, from a manufacturing point of view, do a lot of that validation, and the production cost and resources already then shared across the different platform opportunities. So what it means is that we can have these multiple projects or products being worked in parallel. And that's that sort of platform opportunity that we talk about.
There's no sort of bottlenecks in terms of having to wait for this to be approved or whatnot. Yeah,
exactly. So that's when we talk about the platform part of the story is the differentiation as we sort of look at it compared to a single product opportunity. And we've got a lot of those in the market that, you put all your time and resource into one opportunity.
Binary.
If it doesn't happen or if there's a hiccup or whatever it might be, then that's a pretty significant sort of bottleneck or issue for the business. But here, because we've done 10 to 15 years of R&D, we've put a lot of that resource into the validation work already, which speaks to the work that's been done and that sort of rapid path to market. What that means is, from a commercial point of view, and this is all by design, so that deliberate structure means that the cost that we've got to put into the business moving forward is quite minimal. Like we've got production costs and we've got staffing increase and CapEx and that type of thing. But to bring new products to market, we don't have to start the whole R&D cycle from the start. We've already done
spin it off the sort of manufacturing line, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. And so with that, we call it a flywheel, right? So we get more efficiency in production, things become cheaper, our production and R&D process becomes quicker. And so that means that we've got a very unique path to profitability and free cash flow, which I think for us in the local market is quite an interesting and different proposition. And so that's what we're excited about, is not only the impact we can have on patients, but the fact that we can have these things working in parallel. And so what that means from an income point of view and revenue over a period of time is that as the costs remain relatively still and stagnant, the compounding high gross margin over time means that things will, as we said, from a flywheel perspective, become faster, cheaper, and more effective. And then as we get all of these field-specific partnerships in place, then the production can happen a lot faster and cheaper as well. So that's really exciting that it is a genuine platform. And I know we've heard platform be mentioned quite often, not only in our industry, but in others. And so that's something that I think we're really proud of, is how we've manufactured this really differentiated path to market. And so, as we said before, we do have 3 franchises. And as Ali mentioned, the franchise model for us is almost like a division. And so we've got 3 of those that we're initially bringing to market. One is in bone regeneration, where we're using the product to regenerate and optimize bone healing for dental and oral applications, as well as in orthopedics. And so that's a very distinct franchise in itself, and it's got multiple FDA 510K pathways and multiple partnerships that we're bringing to market.
And sorry, just when you talk about 510K, so this is, and I know that we sort of spoke right at the start when we first met, is it biotech, is it healthcare, is it medtech? How do you sort of look at that and overlay of FDA? This is not a drug discovery sort of pathway, right?
It's a really important part of the story as well. So you're right. So how do you classify an opportunity like this? And I think for us, our path to market is not a drug or a therapeutic or a biologic, which typically requires the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 style validation programs. Here it's a medical device. And so, again, by design, a synthetic device that can be classified, particularly in the US, as what we call a class 2 or a class 3 medical device, means that the path to market's a lot more streamlined and faster and cheaper. And so most of the applications that we're working on across the 3 franchises are applicable for a 510K pathway, which means you can use a predicate that's already in the market to then have a more of a simplified way of bringing product to market. And so for our bone products, there's 2 specific codes that are 510K applicable that we're bringing products to market. In our tissue spacing application, which we're using the same material, same 90% of the Lego structure that we talked about before. Within our surgical spacing franchise, where we've got 2 products, one is for prostate spacing for radiation oncology, and then the other one is also for ophthalmics, which we'll get onto, which is an exciting part of the story for day one today on listing as well. They're also medical devices. And then lastly, in our 3rd franchise, which is in tissue healing, which we're using the material to lay in the bed of surgical incisions to prevent scars. That's also a medical device. And so, it basically means that we've got a much more streamlined path to market. But again, because we've got these things in parallel, means that a lot of the work's been done, and then we're bringing these products to market faster and more effectively.
And one thing is, we know that the concept of a platform is used in the industry quite a lot, but like one thing is the way that we showcase how we use this platform to expedite the development. The best example is, one of the examples is our Tetratherix, the prostate spacing example. From the ideations basically to the large animal study and human research ethic approval for our first in human surgery implantations of a device basically took us less than 18 months. And why that's the case is because as well mentions, all those underlying safety, efficacy of a technology, how to manufacture it, how to sterilize it, how to measure the endotoxins levels, yada, 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 it's been already in place. So we have all those data to be able to present and essentially move almost directly to the large animal study, and after that into the human implantation study. Some things that if it wasn't because of our platform, other companies needed to spend at least 5 or 6 years. We did that basically in 18 months. Again, back to that platform nature of the technology and our propositions, which I believe is the most critical piece of our propositions to the industry.
It's almost like cheating. having the answers already there.
Exactly.
You touched on partnerships. How important is that to the success of the company, and particularly from a speed to market perspective and cost? Not blowing up your capital structure by going it alone and trying to take on the world, sort of thing.
Absolutely, it's another big part of the story, and I think a lot of our thinking comes from many years of doing this, both myself and part of the team, around setting up and managing sales and marketing teams in various geographies around the world, particularly in the US. they're extremely expensive, they're hard to manage, it takes time to set up. And so because we've got this platform opportunity with all of these parallel programs in place, firstly, trying to set up sales and marketing teams will slow us down if we're trying to bring all these things to market to have the most patient impact as we can. And secondly, it's really expensive. And so the other benefit, if you think about bringing on the right partnerships for us, is the material and the way that it's designed from a cost and from a technical perspective is so differentiated that a lot of the interests that we've got are from the market leaders in the industry. So we've got the beauty of being able to work with the market leaders who are interested in working with us, but it means we then are able to tap into that immediate scaled infrastructure in any geography around the world. So a good example is Henry Schein, who's our partner in the dental space. They're the world's leading provider of dental products around the world, S&P 500 business, with a huge infrastructure in pretty much every market. And so we've been working with them for a long period of time to try and figure out the most optimal way of bringing products to market. And so we're thankful to work with them on the dental market around the products, not only in the initial application that we're working on for bone regeneration, but then there's other applications we can work on for this material or changing the Lego a little bit for them to have the way that they can engage with physicians and key opinion leaders in the market and their customers to create more products through the pipeline. And so that's a really exciting part of how we do things. But I think what it speaks to is, again, that differentiated commercial and financial model that we've got. We're lucky enough, and again, by design, the manufacturing margin that we've got in this synthetic material is such that we've got room to play around the distribution margin. And so it means that we don't need to necessarily go and have the cost put into the sales and marketing teams in all these geographies. We can share the margin adequately with the market leaders.
So everyone wins.
So that everyone wins through the process. And again, why we're doing this is to have the most patient impact as what we can. And so this is a way that we can reach the most patients through the most customers and get the most use out of the material for all of that patient outcome that we're looking for, scaled as fast as we can.
And in terms of from a funding perspective, and we'll get to the IPO and rationale around why now and whatnot. How do you sort of look at these, whether you call them subsidiaries or joint ventures or whatever it is, and we'll get to today's news as well. But from a funding perspective, can you take external money into these sort of vehicles, the joint ventures, that doesn't rely on the Tetratherix balance sheet to fund them in perpetuity sort of thing?
Yeah, good question. So the way that we think about bringing products to market is on two different aspects.
Yep.
One is on disruption and one's on displacement. So when we're talking about disruption, that's where we're bringing a product to market that is disrupting the way things are currently done, where typically we've got a bit more time to do that with the right partner over a sort of adequate or appropriate time frame. And so, say for bone grafting, there's nothing that can really do what we do within the bone grafting market. So we've got time to go to the right partner and launch it in the product in the right way, launch it in the market in the right way. But then on the other side of things, we've got a way of displacing the products that are currently in the market for that very specific field. And so prostate spacing is a really good example where there's two products, or it's three, but two that own majority of the market share, but now are clearly not really performing in the way that some of the physicians would prefer them to, around visibility, safety profile, usability, that type of thing. And so we've got an opportunity to go after that immediately and try and bring that displacement to market as quickly as we can. And so the way we think about partnerships on that basis is, if we're disrupting something like we are with bone graft, then we can have a long-term co-development style agreement with a market leader in place, that we have this really long tail of disruption across not only what we've currently got, but then pipeline products as well. But then on the displacement side, if time is of the essence and we do want to bring this to market as quickly as we can, having a flexibility in that partnership model means we can then bring a joint venture structure into play. And the JV structure is really interesting, where we've got the ability on the other side of the JV to bring in, whether it's clinicians, commercial leaders, people who have done it before, to really help us facilitate a more accelerated path to market. And then the beauty of it is that we then have this JV model that sits almost in parallel to Tetratherix, where we own a portion of the JV, of the business itself, but it's got its own funding model, it's got its own balance sheet, it's got its own M&A opportunity as well, importantly. And so
at the core, it uses your product.
That's right.
Which is,
And so the end goal here is that if there is an opportunity for an M&A for that particular JV, it then can get acquired by a market leader. We then get liquidity back into the business through selling the actual asset itself. But then importantly, we then have that continual flow of product supply at high gross margin to a market leader. So we often say it's like having your cake and eating it too. But again, it's that novel and differentiated, deliberate way of structuring the business in a way that we can optimize the platform opportunity. We're not locked into any one way of doing things, but it is with this mindset of, well, how do we get fastest path to market and have the most patient outcome impact as we possibly can.
I just want to dovetail into the sort of funding history of the company. Obviously, raising $25 million, so which is a massive effort and significant validation in terms of what you built and you've developed alongside commercially. How did you get to this point? Yeah, it's obviously been a long time coming. What were the sort of funding rounds? How hard were they? In Australia, whether it's medtech, biotech, healthcare, there's just not a lot of patient capital, particularly from a VC perspective.
Very true.
How do you sort of look at that in retrospect?
So our initial fund was through two angel investors back in 2015, and along with accelerating commercialization grants and New South Wales Medical Device Fund. So the angel investors was around like $2.1 million, followed with a few of these grants, which were in total were like a sub $2 million. That took us till 2020. So for 5 years, the total amount of the investments that we had was around both from a public and private sector was like less than $4 million.
Did pretty well to
very well managed, without being too humble here. But bear in mind, with that amount of funding, we essentially did 2 clinical trials with our technology for dental applications. Obviously, the support of the principal investigator was immense to be able to allow us to do that 2 clinical trials very cost efficiently and also from very timely as well. That took us till 2020, which we have our Series A1, we call it. And in total from 2020 till 2023, in total was another 5 million that we raised as a part of our A1 and A2. And then 2024 was a safe and a pre-IPO for in total of like $12 million. So that has been the journey, very cost efficient. We do take any investment as a privilege all the way through in the whole 10 years. That has been the ethos of the business, to be able to find the most efficient way to use capital all the way through, and that is what took us to the IPO.
But you're right, Simon. I think there isn't a lot of good patient knowledgeable capital in this space for early stage medical and bio opportunities in Australia, and that's not for any particular reason other than we're far away from the US. We're traditionally more a commodities and mining based market.
We want the quick win in terms of the punting mentality as opposed to waiting
exactly
5 or 6 years,
which essentially also made the initial period of the business from 2018 till 2020, 2022, and 2022 make it very challenging for us to pitch the business as a platform. All the VCs wanted to push us towards like the A product, either dental and ortho or whatever. But us not going that way to be just a one single asset company made it more challenging for us to pitch the business till we found the investors that actually appreciate and essentially like what we do as a platform technology. Both Rider Innovation Fund and Radar are those two. Especially Radar like the way that we pitch the business as this sort of a platform similar to Xero mentality, but not in a sort of like a SaaS style, like a software IT tech business, but more as a sort of a medical platform technology. And that is how we essentially could raise capital.
And we did get pulled quite a bit to the US as well. So
that's also very important.
The knowledge and understanding of a platform opportunity is probably a bit heightened in the US as it is here. And so we were pretty close to taking some US money and flipping the business up and going through the process.
That would have been a very different result in terms of a listing. It'd be sort of 5-10 years away.
Oh, exactly. And I think it is part of the process, and I think getting into why listing and why now.
Yep.
I think a lot of that has come from the experience that we've had on raising private venture funds in Australia. And again, it is what it is. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's just the way that it operates. But what we found is that, and as we've demonstrated, the speed and the cadence with which we perform and operate the business is such that the private funding pathways often can't quite keep up with that speed. So we found almost like we were getting slowed a little bit by having to go through the venture funding pathways. And so we've always had listing as something that we were sort of thinking about on the journey. And so the other part that made us think about it more deeply, if you like, in the last sort of 6 to 12 months is as we work our way backwards from supply and demand of the material itself and the production demand, as you start to, as we said, overlay these compounding high gross margin opportunities, the demand on production is such that by 2027, 28, it's going to very much outstrip what we currently have in our production capabilities in Sydney. So if you work your way backwards from having a new facility established, it means that we would have had to raise money around now anyway to scale up and create a new site and commission the capital equipment, etc. So we thought, well, if that's the case, we need to raise capital. The markets look like they might be open. We went through a pre-IPO process in November, December last year and got that away and had some really good feedback and some good sort of understanding investors that gave us some confidence to go through the process. And so, we thought, well, let's just pull the trigger and see if we can get it done, which obviously and thankfully we have, with support of fantastic investors coming in and those that have continued to support. So I think it's one of those things where listing has always been there as an option and something that we were eventually going to get to. But from a fundraising perspective, and also I think just for us generally to have that sort of speed to capital and access to capital as we grow
definitely
is going to be really important.
It's very much, again, an unfair advantage from unlisted world. Just zeroing in on some of the investors who have come in. Obviously, Radar Ventures is Rod Drury and led by Atlanta Daniel, which we'll get to. But Ryder Innovations, they sort of they fly a little bit under the radar in terms of from a fund perspective in Australia, but are powerful and very passionate. How do you sort of look at I think they own over 10%. They sit on the board. How has that sort of experience been in terms of having, and it's not just a rider, but just to single them out, really passionate investors who obviously want to back you, but also they bring other money alongside them and want to introduce you to different groups. How much of a benefit has that been in terms of having advocates like that?
Huge. Absolutely. And I think for us as well, the opportunity that we've got and the way we pitch the business, the way we operate, we're not your typical sort of medical or biotech opportunity as well. And so we're a bit younger, wear T-shirts and jeans and, it's kind of not your average kind of, typical med tech,
lab wearing sort of lab coat.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's been helpful to have that advocacy as we bring that message to market and try and create some news story and differentiated sort of skill set, if you like, amongst the industry. So, Ryder's been fantastic. Radar as well have both been fantastic in not only helping us and advocating for us amongst their investment peers, but also just helping us distill and crystallize the messaging around what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so they've been awesome, really good sort of supporters of us and again, continuing through.
I think that's the biggest thing for me in terms of seeing a number of companies list and whatnot. Usually you back at it, whether it's $10, $20 million valuation at a list, on 100 or 110, my work's done and enjoy the benefits. But they've come in really strongly and supported, which is a fundamental reason for the success of the IPO. Touchwood.
Absolutely, and look, I think like all of our investors, I think really get the story and get the path that we're on. And again, the reason we're doing it is for patient impact and having a difference in the world for people who need it. And so I think certainly the way that Ryder and Radar in particular have supported that part of the mission from day one has been really helpful for us and kept us focused on why we're doing it. And it's very tempting to get sort of pushed or pulled towards the more financial outcome and trying to focus too much on, valuation or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we're doing this for our reason, which they support and certainly sort of agree on. And so that's been really helpful as well, for sure.
And just on the IPO, obviously raised $25 million. There's no sell down or anything like that. One other thing that I just wanted to highlight was in terms of the chairwoman, Emma Cleary.
Emma Cleary, yep.
Again, there's typically, which is absolutely fine, but a number of directors that will sit on boards and are happy to take a director fee and obviously add value at a board level. But she's made a reasonably chunky investment into the IPO as well, which I think again sort of signals a level of alignment, which must be pleasing in terms of you guys leading the business as well.
It's awesome. Yeah,
absolutely.
Emma's been such a massive supporter of ours. I've worked with Emma for many years through Device Technologies and known her for a long time, and I think is probably doesn't get the credit or the acknowledgement for what she's done for the industry, both in the private space, but also through just advocating for young startups in the industry. And so I think she's been an awesome addition to the board, and our board is structured in a way that is fast-moving, supportive, and again, as we talked about, sort of believes in that mission and is deeply on board with it. And Emma, in particular, is a massive believer in what we're doing. So we're very lucky to have her on board.
It's not just a matter of the investments. Obviously, the investments from her was very important, but also the fact that how she's been very supportive of us to sort of like try to reduce the loads when she can.
That's good.
And supporting the executive arm of the business as much as possible. Obviously, along with other board members, we're so lucky. Like when we were starting designing our board structure, we wanted that sort of like element of a support rather than just
like a dream.
Very,
very rarely comes into reality though.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's paid off. It's been amazing experience working with Emma and the rest of the board, obviously.
Yeah.
So the stock trades, I think it's 11 or 10:30, 11 a.m. this morning.
That's right.
We've got a couple of days in hindsight to find out when that is. Barrenjoey and Morgan's obviously listed the company. Two sort of big names in the space, which is again validation in itself. We've got the day one announcement out there this morning. We've got another announcement. Maybe just explain the significance of that and what that really means for investors.
Sure. It's huge, and again, I think it speaks to the support that we've got at the board and the investor level around the introduction and the collaboration, which is one of our values around working with different groups around the world. And so Terasaki Institute is one of our shareholders and a big R&D supporter of ours, and they're essentially our US base, our US hub based in California. Maurizio Vecchione, who is on our board as well, is the Chief Innovation Officer for Terasaki. He comes from an amazing background. His CV is longer than my arm around the stuff that he's done, but has been very heavily involved in running the for-profit and non-for-profit investments for Bill Gates and his group. And so through that, there are investment networks that we've made throughout the US that have been really valuable for us, one of which is Adastral Funds and Adastral Labs, which is based out of New York, that Maurizio's involved in very heavily. They have a portfolio company called BioOptics, which is run and has been set up by an amazing group of physicians out of New York that are ophthalmic surgeons, who we are now working with under a license agreement that we're really excited to announce that we've signed, to create a novel biomaterial for ophthalmic and eye procedures, which Ali can get into in a bit of detail technically. But firstly, from a commercial opportunity, what it presents for us is, as we talked about before, a JV structure where we're equity owners in the business. It's a US company, but we are lucky to be shareholders of the business, so Tetratherix. But importantly, what it provides is access to physicians who do this day in, day out, who have identified an opportunity in the market based on clinical need and the clinical requirement for having something that's innovative for use in all sorts of different ophthalmic procedures. But again, it speaks to that speed to market as well. And so we're already engaging with strategic partners for looking at their involvement potentially in product development, investment, whatever kind of makes sense throughout the time. But yeah, we're really lucky to have BioOptics as a joint venture partner for us that we're announcing today as well. So yeah, it's very exciting.
So this product, the OVD, ophthalmic viscoelastic device, is basically used for any eye surgery. When eye surgeons go inside, they want to do cataract, remove lens or whatever, they need to apply the product for essentially support the eye to hold its structure. Most of these products are coming from a product called chondroitin sulfate, which is essentially extracted from shark fins. Obviously, there's a sustainability issues and so on and so forth. Our product is a synthetic alternative for those products. These products that currently used are inflammatory. So if any residues of the product left in the eye cause spike in the eye pressure for the patients, cause lots of challenges for both clinicians and patients. We showed that our product, or at least the platform product, is not inflammatory. It doesn't have that inflammatory response, and it also can be washed away after the surgery. So what we provide these non-human derived, safe alternatives for ease of use for clinicians and also for better patient health outcome.
And in terms of being a founder, it's often quite hard to hand over the reins per se to a sort of outside CEO, which I've got a lot of respect for. A lot of founders sort of hang on too long, and let ego sort of get in the way. How did you sort of look at Will as the right person to take on your baby?
I think actually, thank you. I think the first time that we offered, like both me and Terence offered the CEO role to Will, it was like 2019. So it wasn't like the ego wasn't a part of our journey at all in any shape or form. And I think this is something mutual, and that is why we can work very effectively with each other. There's no ego from Will's side, there's no ego from my side or anyone else in the team, and that has been, I think, one of the most important pieces of these puzzles and how we could work together. So I offered the role in 2019 to Will, and Will said that he can't do it because of, as he explained, the device technology piece of the equations back then. Then in 2022, when he became more available, so that was no brainer basically.
So it wasn't just a quick overnight.
No,
offer.
It wasn't a quick.
A few years in the making.
Took a few years to go through the process. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But by the time that Will joined, like he knew everything about us. He knew about how we operate. He knew the journey. He helped us to sort of like form a part of that equations about the platform nature of the technology and all of that, which was just been an amazing journey so far. I think it was the best decision that we made back then. Would make exact same decisions again and again moving forward as well.
And just in terms of, we've spoken behind the scenes in terms of you're going to be a company that sort of communicates differently. There's not going to be the sort of long slabs of text and a little bit boring. What should investors look for? Obviously, there's a chunk invested in the IPO. We've had the news today. But is it going to be a story that delivers news flow and milestones? I know that you talk about fast moving and whatnot, but what should investors look for in that case?
Yeah, it's something that's very important to us is how we communicate and educate the market about what we're doing and the different milestones throughout the process. And a lot of it is built on that quite unique news flow that we've got because of the pipeline of that platform opportunity. So at the moment, we've got 3 franchises with 5 products amongst those 3 groups that we've got technical, commercial, partnership, funding, like all of these different classes of announcements and news flow that we want to make sure the market is kept up to speed with. So if you overlay that requirement, if you like, with our view, as we mentioned before, is, we're trying to be a bit more of a youthful, contemporary take on medtech and biotech opportunities, not only here in Australia, but globally as well. And so that means that we are trying to adopt a bit more of a contemporary communication style that's across different platforms. And that's important to us because I think our view, and particularly my view that I have on this type of market and the industry announcements and communications, is people are in the new brands in a way. And so brands are really important, and the company itself is obviously critical to the story. But the people behind the brand and behind the company also make a big part of that. And it's not just Ali and I. We've got a fantastic team of, our executive leadership team with Cherie and Tez behind us are fantastic industry leaders that also want to have, or I think they should have a spotlight on them and how they do things, right? So we want to make sure that there is this constant flow of news. Now, obviously, we've got continuous disclosure obligations that we want to make sure we're in line with, and we need to make sure we comply with all of that regulation. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the market's aware of what we're doing and the different updates, and making sure that they're across kind of how not only their investment, but also how we're tracking to what we said we would do, and then in future for new things that come into the pipeline. Because what we've got now is not what we'll always have. There will be new things that come into the pipeline, both commercially, but also importantly from a technical point of view.
Bring it on. I'm looking forward to this morning in a couple of days' time. But congratulations on the success. Watch this space in terms of delivery. We'll be sure to get you back in. Hopefully you guys get cracking. There's a whole bunch of news flow that comes through in the next 6-12 months. We can check back in next time. But thanks very much and well done again.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having us.